Welcome to Informatica Cloud 101 on-demand course. In this module, we will look at some advanced source options for data synchronization tasks. After completing this module, you will be able to explain the purpose of and create a task using a multiple object source, and explain the purpose of and create a task using a saved query source. In some cases, you may need to join together data from one or more tables or objects in a single data synchronization task. For example, you might be loading data from the contact object in Salesforce into a customers table in on-premise database for your ERP system. While most of the data you need resides in the contact object in Salesforce, some of the data is stored in the high-level account object. So what multiple object source allows you to do is pull data from those two tables into your target object. Let us look at the example in more detail. Here you have got your contact object in Salesforce, where you have got your name, phone number, title, etc. Then you need some additional information that can be found in the associated account record, like account number, account type, website, etc. Using the multiple object source type, in a data synchronization task, you can get information from those two objects and write that data to the target. The multiple object source type is available for the synchronization service only, and it is available for database and Salesforce connections. It is not available for flat file connections. You have the ability to join up to 5 objects per synchronization task. One thing to keep in mind is that those objects need to reside in the same connection. There is no option for joining data across connections. When you join data from multiple database tables, there are a couple different ways that can happen. If a relationship between the two tables exists in the database, Informatica Cloud would automatically write the join condition for you when you add the source objects. If there is no defined relationship between the two tables in the database, another option you can do is to select the key field that relates those two tables together. Then Informatica Cloud will create the conditions based on that for you. Then the last option is a user-defined join, where you have complete control over writing the join condition from scratch. I will now demonstrate how to create a synchronization task that joins data from multiple database source objects. In this demo, we will create a synchronization task that joins data from multiple database source objects. Log in to the Informatica Intelligent Cloud Services and select the Data Integration Service. Click New on the navigation pane to create a new asset. To create a new synchronization task, click Synchronization Task option and click the Create button. Enter the name in the Task Name field and retain the default location. From the Task Operation drop-down, select Insert and click Next. From the Connection drop-down, select the SQL Server connection and select Multiple from the Source Type field. From the Source Object field, select Accounts and Orders and click Select. The objects are selected such that a relationship already exists between the two. We see that the join condition appears automatically in front of the object. If a relationship does not exist between the objects, we can create one. From the Source Object field, select Accounts and Certification and click Select. There is no join condition specified beside the object. Now select Account and select Create Relationship option. Select the source key as Account ID. In the Related Object section, from the Object drop-down, select Certification. From the Object Key drop-down, select Account ID and click OK. The join condition is now specified beside the object. This concludes the demo. You can also join Salesforce objects as well. The way this works is that you first add your primary Salesforce object, and then you would click on it and select from a list of related objects. With Salesforce, you are bound by what predefined relationships exist in Salesforce for objects. For example, if I choose my account object as my primary object, this is a list of relationships that is available to me. So an account can be related to another account, and an account can be related to a user in 3 different ways. It could be the user who is the owner of the record, the user who created the record, or the last user to modify the record. When you select one of these relationships, you will be able to access data from the related object in the field mapping. So as I said previously, you will select the primary Salesforce object first, and then choose the relationship for adding the related objects. Again, keeping in mind that you're going to be bound to whatever predefined relationships exist in the Salesforce object. The business scenario for the demonstration involves getting product data out of Salesforce and using it to populate an on-premise database. To build a data synchronization task that keeps this data in sync, I will use the multiple object source feature, as product data is stored in several different objects in Salesforce. In Salesforce, pricing information is not stored in a single object. Notice that there are 3 objects I'll be pulling data from. Price book entry is the primary object, and it joins the product and price book objects. A price book entry is essentially a product at a certain price. For example, you may have a European and a US price book. Therefore, each product would have 2 entries, one for each product in each price book. When working on data integration projects that involve Salesforce, it is important that you understand how objects in Salesforce relate to one another. This is the URL for the Salesforce data model and ERDS documentation. From here, you can view the entity relationship diagrams for Salesforce objects, as well as view a complete list of objects and a complete list of fields including data type for each object. Just note that this documentation is maintained by Salesforce.com, and the URL is subject to change. I will now demonstrate how to create a data synchronization task that joins data from multiple Salesforce objects. In this demo, we will create a data synchronization task that joins data from multiple Salesforce objects. Now we will continue with the previous demo. Change the connection to Salesforce and select multiple from the source type options. In the source object field, we will select the top-level objects with the Salesforce connection. From the source object list, select Price Book Entry and click Select. Now choose the Price Book Entry object and click Add. In the Relationship Name field, select Price Book 2. From the Related Objects drop-down, select Price Book 2 and click OK. Again, click on Price Book Entry and click Add to add another related object. From the Relationship Name drop-down, select Product 2. From the Related Objects drop-down, select Product 2 and click OK. Click Next to proceed to the target step, and select the SQL Server connection from the Connection drop-down. From the Target Object drop-down, select Product and click Next. In the Field Mapping step, map the source fields to the target. To validate the mapping, click Validate. Click Finish and run the synchronization task. To examine the result, open the Products table. We observe that rows are added to the original table. This concludes the demo. The next topic in this module is saved queries. A saved query is basically a source object that you create from one or more database tables. Essentially, it is the alternative to having your database admin create a view for you. It is something that you can do through the Informatica Cloud interface. You can use it for database sources that you cannot configure with either the single or the multiple object source options. So for example, if you want to include your source filters, or if you wanted to do a complicated join of multiple tables in your source. When you create a saved query, it becomes available for you to use in a synchronization task under the source. So some examples of where you might use a saved query. You might want to perform aggregations in your SQL, so using the SQL min, max, or sum functions. Sometimes you would want to alias column names, so maybe alias columns for multiple tables into one source. An example there might be your orders and order line items. You may also want to alias column names if they are unsupported or are in non-standard format. So for example, if they start with a special character. You may also use it if you have an existing query. So if you have a query that has been used in another application and you want to bring it into Informatica Cloud, you can do that with a saved query. Here are some best practices with saved queries. You should always test the SQL statement on your source database first. Remember, Informatica Cloud is just passing through to the database, so it is always a best practice to test it there, assuming you do have the access to do that. Then for the SQL statement, you should use the select statement. You should avoid using star. Avoid using conversion functions like to character, for example. Also, do not use the SQL count function. So those are just some of the best practices we have come across when using saved queries on projects. Here is a screenshot of a saved query used on a project, just to show you basically anything with the exception of what I told you to avoid from a best practices standpoint. You can do with saved queries. I will now demonstrate how saved queries are created and used in a synchronization task. In this demo, we will create a saved query and use the saved query in a task. Log into the Informatica Intelligent Cloud Services and select the Data Integration Service. Click New on the navigation pane to create a new asset. Select Components. From the list of available components, select Saved Query and click Create. Name the saved query and retain the default location of the query. From the Database Type drop-down, select SQL Server and specify the query as shown on the screen. In the Saved Query Columns Detail section, click the Get Columns button. From the Connection drop-down, select SQL Server and click OK. The columns returned from the saved query are displayed. Click Save. Now we will see how to use a saved query in a task. To create a synchronization task, click on New from the navigation pane. Select Synchronization Task and click Create. Enter the name and retain the default location of the task. Select the operation as Insert and click Next. From the Source Connection drop-down, select SQL Server Connection and select the source type as saved query. In the Source Object drop-down, a list of available saved queries appear. When we select a saved query, the data is obtained from the source database based on the saved query. In this way, we use the desired saved query in our tasks. Rest of the task wizard functions in the same way as any other synchronization task. This concludes the demo. In this lab, you will build and configure a synchronization task that loads data from multiple Salesforce objects into a flat file. This concludes Module 7. This module showed you how to understand when you might use a multiple object source type in a task, create a task with a multiple object source type, and create a saved query to use in a task.